But what it doesn't do is record who is here. So. All right. So for the sake of time and for us to go ahead and get started, if that's okay with everybody, I wanted to go ahead and let us start doing introductions and let everybody know it's good. I'm happy to see everybody's face. It's been a while. Sorry, I can't touch you. But if you all wanted to go ahead and do quick introductions, and then, oh, there's another person. Okay. We'll do quick introductions with everybody, and then we'll do a very quick, or you know what, we'll skip the icebreaker. Most of us know each other, right?
I think
Yes.
we do.
I think there might be a few people who I haven't seen in the room together before, but we'll try to figure it out. Is there anything that we need to do before we get started that I need to know about? I know some people have to leave early, but some people can stay. I don't know if we want to try to schedule a follow-up. There's a lot of data to go over. I've been going over it for weeks with Kinston PD. So look, keep your face. So what we can do is, I don't know if you want to go ahead and schedule a follow-up to this, so that it gives you a chance to digest some of the data, and then you can come back and ask questions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's fine. We can schedule a follow-up and just send it out to everyone in attendance via email. I think
Okay. Okay. All right. So can we do quick introductions? So everybody is unmuted. I assume that most people have used Zoom before, so you know, try not to talk over each other. If we see that that ends up being a problem, I'll mute everybody and try it again. Okay? So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Boss
So
man.
I'm Tim Dilday. I'm the police chief here in Kinston. Just right quick, I'd like to thank everybody for sharing a few minutes to join us today. We're all busy. All of our time is valuable. So if you have to leave, we understand. Stay as long as you can. Just ease out. We'll send a follow-up email. And everyone in attendance should have gotten an email with all the data that we're going to discuss. So just right quick, a lot is going on in the world, and a lot is specifically going on in the world of policing. So we'll get to it all, but it won't be today in an hour or an hour and a half. We're going to stay on track and just understand that your police department is responsive and receptive, and we're going to continue fighting the good fight. And I appreciate everybody joining us today. That's my take for the moment.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
East Point.
Who was that?
This is Lily. I'll go.
Okay.
I'll go with Lily. I'm one of the executive members of the NAACP, so I'll be represented in there today. And I'm CEO of Perfecting Destiny Coaching Services, and that's an organization that I work with parents and youth around the world. And I'm interested in what's going on in our city, so that's where we are. And I appreciate everything that everybody is doing, and looks like we've got a ways to go. So I've got my sleeves rolled up at however I can help.
Who's next?
This is Colleen. I'll go. I'm Colleen Kaczynski. I'm the district administrator for the Guardian Ad Litem program, and I serve Wayne, Lenoir, and Greene counties. But my primary county is here in Lenoir County. I love this community. I've worked for 34 years with children in some sort of the court system. I wanted to share that I'm really excited. We took the work that we've gotten started here in Lenoir County and applied for a similar grant through the Governor's Crime Commission in Wayne County, and we just received word this past week that that is going to be funded. So we're getting this whole initiative going, and I think it's going to be that much better because we've already learned from the work that we've done here. So I'm really, really excited about that. So, and Linnea was a huge part of that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm excited too.
Can I
Hi,
be
everyone.
seen? Can I be seen?
I'm sorry, say again?
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself since you started?
Yeah. Abdul Rahim Saleen. I am the head of the group called the Center for Human Excellence in Lenoir and Wayne County. And what we do is work on trying to bring the people to the excellence of their human life according to the way God created them to be.
Great.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Brent Williams, Superintendent of Lenoir County Public Schools. It's great to be with all of you this afternoon. I want to thank Chief Dilday and Linnea and Yolanda, the whole team, for facilitating this process. And I'm certainly looking forward to the next steps in our journey. And thank you for being willing to put your hands to this work.
Thank you. Ms. Houston, you want to go next?
Okay. My name is April Houston. I am the Executive Director of RAD, which is Raising Awareness for the Developmentally Disabled here in Lenoir and Wayne counties. Also, I am probably the newest practitioner of Triple P in Lenoir County, but I am accredited for Stepping Stones, which is for families with children with disabilities here in Lenoir County. And I am also a guardian ad litem here in Lenoir County also.
Okay. Sarah, you
Good
want to go
afternoon.
next?
Yes, sir.
Me next.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Sarah Arney. I am the Community Development Planner at the City of Kinston. Happy to be here.
Keith, I'm just trying to make sure I get everybody.
You're fine. I'm Keith Coyette. I'm a major with the police department. I'm in charge of support services, and I've worked with this group for the past year. So just plugging away.
I'm driving Keith crazy. Cassandra?
Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse the noise. I'm getting some stuff worked on at my house right now, if it's interfering. But I'm Cassandra Suggs, one of the behavior specialists with Lenoir County Public Schools.
Thank you. Yolanda?
Yolanda, can you hear me?
I hear both of you.
I know, right? Turn my other phone down so it's not working. Excuse me. Somebody else.
You got a lot of reverb. It's turn your phone or some of them that's kicking back. So you got two things playing out loud.
Somebody go.
Okay. Miss Livingston?
Hi, I'm Kalia Livingston. I supervise foster care and adoptions for Lenoir County DSS. I've been a supervisor for almost 3 years now, but I've been with the department for 6. And this is actually my first meeting I am attending on behalf of our director, Jeffrey Harrison.
Great, thank you. Miss Shannon?
Hey, sorry about that. I'm having some internet issues. I'm Shannon Riggs with the library, and we're pretty excited because we have our kids back in here now. It's limited capacity, but everyone's back in here. We're pretty excited about that. Glad to be here today.
Great. Mr. Rhodes?
D'Amica Rose. I'm also a behavior specialist with Lenoir County Public Schools, and I also coach basketball and football with Fairfield Recreation.
Mr. Fields? Mr. Fields, can you hear me? I guess not. Miss Suggs? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hey, I'm Kenyari Fields. I am the founder and director. Founder and director of Boys to Kings Mentoring Alliance here in Kinston, and the multicultural outreach director for East Carolina Council.
Miss Suggs, please.
Good afternoon. I am Crystal Suggs. I am a member of the City Council here in Kinston. I'm also the board chair for Kinston Teens, and I've been one of the founding members of this Disproportionate Minority Contact Organization. So I'm glad to be here.
And Ms. Hill.
Vanessa Hill. I work at East Point.
Okay. And Rouse, Mr. Rouse.
Gregory Rouse, Assistant District Attorney.
Okay, great. And who's Les? I don't know who Les is.
Hey, I'm Les. I own Jay's Nightclub. This community
Oh, okay.
leader.
Okay. I can't see your face. I have met you before. And Nancy Wade.
I'm here.
Okay.
Nancy, I'm Pastor Nancy Wade of Just Do It for Christ Ministry, Community Outreach.
Great. And CJ Day, who's that?
That was just Jane. She has to step off for a second.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, sounds good. All right. So I have sent you guys via email. Has everybody gotten the email with the attachments? If you haven't, let Yolanda or myself know and we can forward them out to you again. So that's our agenda for the day. We have a lot of data to go over. I don't know if you've seen the PowerPoint that I forwarded to you, and that's really not even all of it, but that's the beginning of what we need to be looking at. So I just wanted to give everybody a chance to start to digest that information, and then we can come back again and take another bite and another bite until we're really feel like we can wrap our arms around what we're dealing with. See a few more people come in. So does anybody have any questions about that for today? So I know a lot of people have, like Chief Dilday shared, a lot of stuff has been happening in the world and around North Carolina and around the country, and about police reform and implicit bias, policing, racial discrimination and disparities in policing. So there's a lot going on and there's a lot to unpack. And so I just wanted to give everybody a chance. Typically, we have our little check-in sessions with each other. I know a lot has gone on. So is there, I don't know if this is probably the best way to do it because it's so many of us in the room now to be able to check in. But I want to say that, you know, we do need to check in with each other about where things are and how the city of Kinston, the community of the county of Lenoir is doing and feeling as a result of all of this that's going on and how it's impacting you directly. So does anybody want to just take a few minutes and do that really quickly? And even COVID as well. Anybody? Or are we just ready to jump into all that great data? Anyone? Anyone? Don't jump at once. All right, well, we'll just go into data and then we can try it again later. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share on the screen some of the data that I have that we've reviewed. I have spent a lot of time going over data. And we have, and I have gone over it in depth with KPD. And so we've had a lot of great discussions. So first of all, I want to give a big shout out to Chief Dilday and to Chief James for being willing to do this 2 years ago. You know, that they really did start this process a while ago, and it's a big deal. It's very proactive, and I look forward to Kinston being a role model city for the whole entire state and potentially the whole country. But being willing to be vulnerable and honest about what the situation is a big deal. And I think we need to give them credit for that and speak. And my goal has always been to speak in positivity and love as I share the data. And I want to encourage all of us to kind of keep that in mind as we are looking at what's really going on. Okay?
If I may interject,
Sure.
I know Zoom's a little difficult because it's hard to slide in a timed comment.
Yes.
I appreciate the kind words, but I want it to be well known that this isn't a police department program, it's community. And I think what we collectively are doing is representative of our community, the leadership of our community, not just a police department program. This is something that's school system, city council, just, the courts, DSS, everyone who's here and some who aren't. It's just representative of what we are attempting to do as a community moving forward. And we've taken some initial steps to keep from being in some of the places that we're now seeing on TV. We're not perfect. None of us are. But our goals are to work towards that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing that. So let's get started. So this is our DMC analysis, and this is what you literally have in front of you, so you can make your own notes. I really would like you to make your own notes and start asking questions as you see things, and if things don't look clear, ask me. Otherwise, we will, I'll keep going, but we really do need to have some real questions about stuff. So I did the wrong thing. Here we go. All right. So really quickly, this is just a general analysis. And I'm going to go over some of us that were part of the training when the people from DC came down. I'm going to go over a little bit about this and why, how this connects to our data really quickly. So again, why is this issue important? Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world. There have been a lot of police-involved shootings. There have been a lot of challenges that have happened in communities, and then we're seeing a lot of upheaval, a lot of dissatisfaction with law enforcement. So this was an opportunity for us to look at this in a realistic way. This isn't just, simply about feeling. Feeling does matter, but this is about what is really happening, what the data is really showing us, this conversation today. So really quickly, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Atiana Jefferson, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Rayshard Brooks are some of the really big names that have been in the news. And so I think we need to remember and reflect on those names and think about how our community looks like or can have the same challenges that some of these other communities have had. Okay. So again, some of these slides should look familiar to you, those of us that were at that training. So there are several different focal points that we're going to look at. We're going to look at a societal focus, which is the bigger picture, the institutional system, and the individual. So how do we measure disparity? We measure disparity with overrepresentation, disparate treatment, and unnecessary entry and movement deeper into the youth justice system. And so this data that we are examining, we're really looking primarily at overrepresentation and disparate treatment. Any questions so far?
What judge was that in Wayne County that was leading up an effort?
Say it one more time.
What judge was that in Wayne County that was?
That's Judge James.
Judge James.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Erica James. So those of us who've gone to the racial equity classes, it was the conversation about it's the groundwater. It's not just the fish. It's not just the kids that are the problem. It's the whole entire system that is part of the problem. And so, hello? Okay. So then, and so what we're looking for in this data is we're looking for the common response, the way the system generally reacts to people, not the extreme cases. We're looking for the regular way that youth interact with the system. Okay. So systemic reform. So again, this is a chart that we've seen before. And so what the place that we're really focusing primarily is on the arrest portion of this primarily right now today. So this is where law enforcement, schools, probation, and child welfare are interacting with youth and them being connected into the system. Thoughts, questions before I start digging in too deep? We're good? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the data so that we can have data-driven and locally driven strategies for addressing these issues. We're going to look for collaborative solutions, and we're going to be intentional, and we're going to focus on measurable outcomes. So we don't just want to say, hey, I want you to just stop talking to people. We need something that's really, that we can measure, that we can work towards specifically. Okay? So one of the things that I would say this is definitely a Dilday thing. After we had the training, he immediately said, okay, Lenoir, we're going to work on Rego immediately. And so he literally started digging around and started pulling together data for me to start looking at. So, but we've gone beyond Rego. And I want you that Rego was just the beginning, and we're looking at beyond that, and we're looking at treatment and how different parts of the system interact with people with this data that we found. And so what we're trying to do is we're going to be doing some trends and snapshots. We're going to be looking at baseline data. We're going to look at what are the differences. We're going to look at tables. We're going to look at low-hanging fruit, some things that I think we can address pretty quickly. We're going to talk about what regular data collection it is that we need to start putting in place so that we can see when things start to happen. And then some other kind of plans and who's going to be responsible, not only for monitoring, but for keeping up with what's happening. Okay?
Okay.
So here we go. So with this, the analysis that I've done is a long-term study. And when we talk about long-term, we didn't look at just 1 year, we looked at 5 years. And the study is for youth ages 15 and younger, and it is quantitative data. And quantitative data means it doesn't have feelings attached to it. So we don't know how someone felt or how they felt like they were being treated, if they were being treated fairly. We don't know any of that. That's not included in this data. This is just quantitative numbers and check boxes, I guess you could say. The document is evidence of systemic and ethnic bias in KPD and other youth service systems. So what we're looking at is where do we find the difference in treatment, and where do we find the, and how is it impacted by race? The documents that I sent you, which would include the juvenile contact form. That juvenile contact form is the form where we collected the data. Now, all the forms weren't filled in completely, so some of the data points won't be the same total amount because some things were missing. This data does not include use of force data, and again, it doesn't include qualitative data. Questions, thoughts? The idea of what we're looking for is how people are normally treated, how frequently they're treated, what's the history, and what are the trends. We want to separate fact from anecdotal conversation. You know, this is what I think is happening, or I heard this about this. This is about what really was reported. And this is also an opportunity for us to clarify the roles of law enforcement and how they engage with youth. And this is an accurate reflection of KPD interactions with youth. So some of the ways we can use this data is to inform the community about youth, crime, gangs, drug use, behavioral health, school to prison pipeline, disparate and discriminatory treatment. This allows us to understand the scope of the problem. This allows us to inform policy decisions, identify potential training for law enforcement and schools and service providers and decision makers, identify strategies and goals to reduce and eliminate bias and improve the lives of Black youth and families. This is a way to combat racial bias in policing and in all systems. And it's a way of improving the overall justice delivery system for all the community. So here we go. So overall, we had 306 contacts from 2014 to 2018. And if you can see, what we have here is in 2014, you had 55 contacts. In 2015, you had, spotlight, wrong thing. Okay. In 2015, you had 61 contacts. Ooh. And I don't like this now. And let me close this, clear. In 2016, you had 89. In 2017, you had 60. And in 2018, you had 37 contacts with youth. So one of the questions that I have in general is what happened in 2016 that caused a major spike? I think that that's important, that when you're looking at data, when you are, as a community, are having conversations about public safety and how youth are being interacted with, or how people in general are being interacted with, you want to ask your question, what's making something different? What happened that year that would cause something to be different? Thoughts, questions?
I only said, Lenoir, I said before that was a flood year, and I'm not saying they were out of school, they were not, and so forth. I don't know, but I mean, I know they were, but I'm just saying that could be a possibility.
Okay.
I would like to interject a little bit about contact and what contact actually means. So this contact, Linnea referenced the email that was sent with the attachments, and there's a juvenile contact report. That's a form that an officer would fill out that if it were an adult, it would be called an arrest sheet. So it's documentation of a crime where the juvenile was temporarily detained and vast majority of the times released to a parent or guardian. So it doesn't mean every contact that a police officer had with a child, just where we're documenting an incident that would be a crime had it been an adult.
And I think that's one of the questions I think that we have to clarify in your reporting overall, so that so that other people are able to see the difference in what is just an interaction versus an arrest.
So a basketball game or a high five or a parade, that's just life that we all hopefully experience daily through our lifetimes. That's not a reported type of thing. So we're only measuring the things we report, and the things we report are criminal type incidents.
Right. But again, and I think as we go deeper, for all of us to have conversation about, so what is it that we're reporting? What is it that we're seeing are the things that are concerns that we go, yeah, we need to take this to the next level, and making sure that those things are marked separately. So then you as a community go, look, we recognize that this might be problematic behavior, but it doesn't rise to the level of this, or, you know what I mean? Okay. But I think it's important for you to be able to assess and go, hey, this is what happened this year versus last year, and what's the difference? So next is interactions by year and gender. So I think this is important because you need to see that, again, you're seeing the rise overall, but you're seeing it with males and females, and the difference. Is that me, Dustin, or is that somebody else? Okay. What the difference is in seeing the difference in how the girls were over 2014, 2015, 2016 were actually very consistent. And then you start to see a decrease, which I think is pretty good. It actually kind of goes against the national trend because there have been more and more girls interacting with law enforcement since probably the last 10 years or so. Thoughts? Okay. So here are your total interactions by race and gender. This is, white women are green, white men are yellow, Black females are red, and Black males are blue. So the question here is, again, what's the difference in between Black females and white females? What's the difference between Black males and white males? And why they're having these interactions with law enforcement? What is it that they're doing differently? What is law enforcement doing differently as it relates to interacting with these populations of people separately? Any thoughts, questions?
This is Kenyari speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think what happens with this data is that we probably will have to have some more of it so we can understand what's happening or what while the contact is happening with the Black people or the Black youth and the Black female youth and versus the white males and the white female youth. If you get one officer that gets a kid and lets them go and have a conversation with them, and then you have another officer that has another kid in that same situation but reports of contact, then how is it accurate? You know, because you have some of those officers that I've had experiences with that show no mercy, and then you got those like Deal Day, you know. So we want to know how. I want to know how would it be accurate to try to pinpoint what's happening, or how to best create something to make it better if we don't have. Like if you go to some stores and they have just, this is the menu, period. Whether you're in Kinston, Greenville, Goldsboro. So if these kids are being pulled over or having contact specifically for this, if it's not all the way being reported, how can this data even help us?
That's a really good point.
It is a very good point. And what we are doing is across the board, making sure that every interaction is accurately recorded. So caution with the juvenile contact. Just because we filled out the paperwork in contact doesn't mean that the officer was being overly harsh or was referring them to court or anything punitive. The vast majority of them, I believe our data will show, are marked handled within the department and released.
Actually, that's
Is
not
that
true.
not, is that not right?
That's not true.
Okay, all right. So there is a portion for handled within department and released, which would be, hey, we had a contact, but they're not referred to court and things like that. Some things we have to refer. We don't have an ability to divert, but we're trying more and more to do that.
Again, I think these are all good points. I think that's why we looked at the data so we could be really clear about what it is that we think is happening versus what is actually happening.
Find out where we are to figure out where we need to go.
Exactly. So, does anybody else have any thoughts about this one before I move on?
I did have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How do these statistics compare to the overall makeup of Kinston's population? That's something that we've looked at.
Yes, it does. And so I think when we go into some final analysis, I'm going to go over that a little bit more because I think once I just wanted everybody to kind of see the raw data first and then to go into some more in-depth analysis in the comparison. But you're right, and you're on the money on that. And there are some that I actually literally refer to that, but you're absolutely right. Good point. Any other thoughts? I know that's a good data person. That's a good person who's going to join my data subcommittee. That's a good one. Anybody else? Okay, moving on. So in general, the youth have contact with officers. So this slide is about, are they contacting SROs? Are they contacting just regular law enforcement? So overwhelmingly, they're contacting law enforcement all across the board. They're not just interacting with law enforcement in schools. This is across the city. This is everybody. And the majority of them are interacting with non-SRO officers. Okay. Thoughts? Okay.
Philosophy with the school system and the PD is school problems are school problems. Do everything we can within that school not to create law enforcement issues.
So I wonder, Linnea, does this data show where the points of contacts occur in our community?
Yes, and I'm going to go over that.
Okay.
I don't know if we're going to make it through all that today. It's a lot.
Did you send that out though?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I don't know if you're going to
hadn't
be
had
able to
time to review.
understand it all. And and by the way, let me just say this. You all are receiving this data. I don't want some of the address data. I don't want it to be shared with everyone. I want you all to be aware that, we want to keep people's privacy private and not share, oh, we saw this address, or we saw this, or we saw that. We want to be aware of that. There are no names in this, but I just want to make sure, because I did a list of all the addresses to show where contact was made. But yes, we do know where those contacts are. Anybody else? Okay. So the next point is, I think it's really important, is that on the juvenile contact form, there's a place where it calls contact origin. And that is how people are made contact with, or how they, I guess, how about you answer that, Chief Dilday? What is contact origin and what is on view?
So what it's relating to is what brought the incident to the officer's attention. And what you'll find is the 5.6% there are going to be court-ordered type things. You have a juvenile who was on probation and violated, and there was an order issued. We had to find and locate her. So the vast majority of our contacts are things that are not issued by the court. They're things that an officer encountered. But that doesn't mean that it's officer initiated. It just means that an officer either saw something or most likely responded to a call for service. I think you'll see a lot of like larcenies and shopliftings and things like that. So it doesn't mean that the officer initiated the contact. It just didn't come from the court system on a paper, which is, what it's showing us is the courts are doing everything they can not to issue papers on juveniles and keep the those things within the court and not make custodial.
Okay. So can you spend a little time and explain what on view is?
On view is going to be anything that an officer sees or responds to during their tour of duty, absent of an order issued by the court. So if there was a custody issue, paper issued by a judge, then we would take the paper and go find the juvenile or the person. So that it doesn't have anything to do with an incident that has happened, is currently occurring, or has just happened. It's an issue, a paper issued by the court. On view is going to be something that an officer sees or responds to during their tour of duty. They go to a fight, they go to a shoplifting call, they observe suspicious activity and inquire, that type of thing.
But that would also include 911 calls.
Every one of them.
Okay. So part of that is, so just to clarify and just for the discussion to make sure people are clear, is on view includes 911 calls and it includes officer initiated stops, correct? So that would be if an officer was riding in his car and he thought he saw something, or somebody flagged him down and said, hey, come over here. And this also includes someone getting a phone call. So on view is basically, I told Keith this, it's just a big old bucket. It's a big old bucket.
Court paper, everything other than a court paper.
And why it's important to know that is that part of the challenge for African Americans or Black people or people of color is figuring out why are people being stopped. And so separating 911 calls from officer initiated is important so that people can then go, okay, well, how many of the 306 were the officer saw something versus how many of these were 911 calls? Does that make sense to everybody? Thoughts?
Yes.
Can I ask what temporary means? There's the juvenile court and then there's the temporary.
It'll be a summons, a court summons. Both of those things would be court initiated.
Thank you.
So again, I think this was when we had our discussions, especially with BJ, we had a lot of conversation about how can we start breaking this up and separating this data so that we can have a clearer understanding of why and how these contacts are even beginning in the first place. And this is also including the schools. So whatever interactions that law enforcement is having or the SROs are having at the schools, it is also included in the on view bucket.
Come on, because my bathroom is, okay, let me get my stuff.
Okay. All right, next. Yeah. So the next piece of data is most of your interactions that are happening in Kinston are happening with residents, not non-residents, but residents. I think that that's important because that means that your police work primarily is focused on its community. It's not a lot of outside people coming in and doing things, or that is true that is you do have some data for non-residents, but primarily they're servicing residents. The other thing that I thought was really positive was that the majority of the interactions were not substance abuse related. So more 70% of them are probably more like, what is that? Bad math. More like 85% or so are, 87% are not substance abuse related. So I thought that that was really good.
There's no testing or anything involved in that. It's just a quick observation of the officer.
Right. Self-reported. So this is the officer. There is no test that goes along with this. Okay. So again, I still think that says that that's really positive, that means that you all as a community aren't dealing with a huge drug problem. or you're not running across a lot of kids that are using drugs when you're interacting with them, which I think is positive. Yes? Thoughts? Okay, moving on. So in general, this is a chart that shows all of the different first charges, and actually doesn't include all of them because they couldn't all fit on one chart. But overall, what you're seeing here is the breakdown of charges. So the vast majority of the charges that you're having in your community are about shoplifting, which I would say is probably more poverty related than anything else. You're not seeing a lot of violent activity. Most of the simple physical assault and aggravated assault is happening at the schools, or fighting. So what you're seeing, and you're not seeing any serious injuries, and you're not seeing a lot of weapons. So, and no major weapons in your community that the youth are using. So I think that that's a really positive thing. So the other thing is you're not seeing a lot of drug violations. So again, you're not seeing any major horrible crimes that would make you go, oh my gosh, this is such a dangerous community to be in. Any thoughts about that? Nobody? I would think that would be positive. Somebody would be happy to see that. Okay, all right. Okay. So you're also seeing contacts by officers, pretty much again, like by all officers. I've seen some from Dilday. I've seen some from almost everybody I've met. I've seen a contact sheet for. So that means everybody is having contacts or interactions with young people. So here's the chart that are kind of the data that Dilday was referring to earlier about how these are handled. Are most of these being handled within the department, or most of these being handled outside the department? Well, what your data shows is that the majority of your interactions, they are being referred to juvenile authorities.
So I'm curious about this, Linnea.
Yeah, go for it. I am too.
Do we have a breakdown at this point of which ones are felonious and which ones are misdemeanors?
I didn't break it down that way, but we can.
Yeah, if we could, I would be interested in that because all of the felonies have to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's no.
Now, what I have done is I have broken them down by charge. I have done that.
Okay, I would be interested in looking at that because the felonies have to go, and then if you had victim crimes, there's not a lot of leeway as far as the referral to court. Right.
And so as we go deeper, but this is just the big picture of understanding where kids are, that you are primarily referring kids to the juvenile authorities. What we would like to see is that we're going to start to see these numbers flipped, right? And what we would like to see is actually see them decrease and start seeing more referrals to social services, teen court, mental health, so that we're showing a robust system where kids and families are being referred to these systems instead of being referred to the juvenile system. Thoughts? Anybody?
Yes, Lynette, this is Jerry Burns.
Hey!
Hey, where did you get those statistics as it relates to juvenile court? Is that information that I pulled?
No, this is their reporting. This is off of their juvenile contact sheets. This is not yours.
Based on what they put as how it was remedied. Okay.
Yes, this is how KP, and that's one of the things that we discussed, that we need to break down this a little bit further, even with you guys, and go, so what actually you all took as a referral, correct? And took it up to the next level.
And so yeah, I mean, but yeah, so we would just need to know, because again, we would have to see what break down the actual cases and what actually came to us, and then we would be able to determine. It's a tedious process, but we could
Yes.
probably do over a period of time.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that, again, part of what I started off with is that it's important that we go, this is the first step on data. This is not the end, this is the beginning, but you need to see that this is the decision that the officers are making. And it's important for us to understand that the officers making these decisions impact the overall system and how referrals are being made. But yes, you're right, Mr. Burns. Anybody else? Okay. I expect there should be more on this one, but we can talk about it later. So we're going to move into overrepresentation. So overall, this is an understanding of that the red line are white people in the system and the blue line are Black people. And as you can see, it's a very big difference. Pretty much overall for white people, you're not seeing any more than 7 or 8 interactions over the course of a year. That's probably the higher end. And you're seeing, again, on average, about 45 to 50 interactions with Black people every year that are young people. So here it is again, over the whole 306 contacts that I've measured, 93% of them were Black. Thoughts?
Lene, that's probably based on, I'm gonna say population in the city too, right?
Well, your city population is not 93% Black. It might feel like that from what I understand, but your city population is not 93% Black. But I can share that. Huh?
I said that's high.
It's very high. It's very high.
To see what our next census data is on that, and it's not just all population, youth population. We gotta remember we're talking about youth population also.
Is it 86%?
It's 93%. Oh, what your overall city?
The current census data says 67%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
That's not age specific, right, Sarah? That's total population. Yeah.
That's total.
No, that's total population.
That would be based on, your census data, which includes all the members of your household.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, maybe I can get a copy of the presentation.
Sure. So again, this is, so we're looking at 93% Black and 6% white for just general contacts. Huh?
These contacts still based off of like the phone call, the 911 calls?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything. So this is your contacts by year, gender, and race. Again, so what you're seeing is there are several years that you just don't have any white female contacts at all. You're seeing one, and you had a spike in 2017. I think you had a set of twins that really caused trouble. They caused 3. Then you have your white males, which is the yellow. Again, you're not seeing a lot of them. You're seeing a max of 4 in 2016. And then you're seeing your Black females and your Black males. Okay. And this is across all the years, broken down by year. Okay. Thoughts? All right. So this is your age and race interactions. Again, I think this one is really important. And this is really important for a lot of reasons. So you have when the kids are younger, under the age of 10, the only interactions that you're having are with Black children. And I think that's important for a lot of different reasons, because that shares that youth are being, real children, small children are actually being seen in criminal-like ways. And I think it's important that you all have an understanding of that. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just means that you need to, as a community, recognize that even young children, 10 and younger, are being seen.
So, yeah, you don't have a police officer who's riding around looking for a 9-year-old to.
That's definitely not the point I'm trying to make. I don't know how those interactions
We have
happen.
been summoned by the community to deal with some social ills which involve very young kids. So just the big bad policeman. Just remember that.
But it's also what really, it's not just one or two. What we're seeing is this is 12 kids under the age of 10 and under, that and so what we're trying to say is, so what happened? What is going on? If it is a societal ill, if it is that a behavioral issue, then the right way to handle it needs to be fleshed out and move forward, versus them interacting with law enforcement in a criminal capacity. I think it's important that people realize.
And again, when they're 13 and 15 and 18 and 25, that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, and because we don't want it to become that. We don't want them to have such interactions at such a young age that they get used to it. And then you end up being, and not only you as law enforcement, but the whole community ends up trying to repair that relationship. And instead of going, hey, what can we do ahead of time to address it? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When it comes to these numbers, I'm looking at these ages, and of course, the younger it is, the more disturbing it is, no matter what the race is. So my question is any of this data separating or showing any of the children that may have special needs or mental health needs?
No.
That may be something that needs to be added to this.
Yes. Good point. Thank you. So make a note. Make sure we're making notes. That's a very good point. I'll put it down there.
And I honestly have been wondering that question throughout all of this. So, I mean, because I'm seeing all these graphs and data, and I'm sitting here thinking of all the possibilities of the numbers, the sheer numbers of how many fall under ID or DD or anything else.
You're right. Any other thoughts before I move on? Thank you for sharing that, though. That was good.
I got a question.
Yes.
So by seeing these charts and everything, I mean every Black person who gets involved with the law is getting annotated, because I know, goodness world, at least one white person that had to be involved with the law.
Yes, I think that's a good question. And I think as we go through, I think even kind of talking about what Chief Dilday said in the beginning, I have to remind myself to say Chief Dilday. But yes, it is important. And that's why I was saying it's important to tease out those that were arrested, how much impact they had with the system. If their information ends up in the big crime database, which these forms, yes, they did end up in the juvenile. This is a juvenile contact form. This is a form that KPD uses to monitor and measure their interactions with youth. So they are keeping their names, their phone numbers, and their addresses and all that other good stuff, so that they know that this officer interacted with them about this, correct, Chief Dilday?
Yeah, it is a state form. It's the DCI 600F, I believe the name would be. I don't know how old the form is, but I can tell you for sure it's 25 years old, probably much older than that. And it's just the documentation of a contact with a juvenile. So what we're seeing now, I think, in years advanced is, well, I would like to see some additional data to be able to be extrapolated from this. So what we're doing is what has been the expectation to collect data. This data doesn't leave our agency unless it's referred to court. It's part of our requirement to maintain these records. But I think what when there's talk of police reform and what we've been dealing with the juvenile interactions and how can we better as a community deal with issues, if there's other things that we need to be collecting at this initial time, I think what we're learning is, we would love to see, hey, do you have a DSS case? Do you have these other things involved? And to be able to document that along the way. We have to start somewhere, and we've started.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay. And the only other thing I would like to point out here is that we see for 14 and 11 to 13-year-olds and 14 and 16-year-olds where we see a jump in the numbers. And my expectation or my thoughts is that as we go forward from 2019 forward, you're going to see an even larger number in this. And so we need to figure out how we're going to start even with the increase in number, and that we can separate the 17-year-olds so that we're counting apples to apples and oranges to oranges, that we're still working to trend this number down versus trending it up. Okay. So this chart is a little hard to read, but I just wanted to kind of show you, this is first charge. So this is everybody that gets charged or listed, or what the officer decided the complaint would be about, correct? This is what the charge listed would be. So part of the reason why I'm showing you this is, and you can't see them all in one screen, but this shows you that some of them are charged, that Black people are charged and white people are charged, and then there's some that only Black people have been charged with. And so I'm going to break this down even more so you can see each charge, but this is just the overall kind of picture of it. Okay. So that's what, so almost think of it like a telescope. We're about to scope down and see this in greater detail. So our first charge group, this is all larceny, and these are in alphabetical order. So you don't get excited, go, why are these like this? These are in alphabetical order. So it's not in particular. So again, this is all other larceny, all other sex offenses, all other simple assault, all traffic. And it's interesting that some of these are neck and neck, that they're 50%. And some of them are all 100 are only Black, and some of them are different than that. So next. So here's first charge group 2. So again, so we're seeing burglary, first forcible entry. That is, I have you all on my screen, so I can't read it. So that's 2, I'm missing a number for some reason. But anyway, so you all should be able to read that a little better in the paper, but the forcible entry, so you're seeing that there are Black people and white people both charged with that. But then after that, burglary, non-forced entry, calls for service, city ordinance violation, criminal damage to property, disorderly conduct, drug violations, all of those, only Black people have been charged with those.
What does call for service mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that one out now. So that would be something that we documented on a contact form that there wasn't a crime listed. Major, go ahead, kind of help me out. I'm trying to run through that in my mind right now and see how that would.
That could be where, I'll give you an example, where mom
I asked him this question too, didn't I?
Okay, it makes sense. I got it. Go ahead.
Mom calls police because Charles doesn't want to go to school. The police department has to respond because if we're dispatched, we have to respond. So we go talk to little Charles, make sure he goes to school. While we're there, mom tells us that little Charles, this is the 5th time this has happened in the past 2 weeks. She also gives us examples of other things that he's been giving her problems with. At that point, we would do a juvenile contact sheet on little Charles. It's not really a crime, but little Charles is giving her a lot of issues, and it has a chance to elevate over time. So that's where that comes into play. Does that make sense?
It's a trend towards undisciplined juvenile. Jerry, if you're still here, is that appropriate
Yes.
response to that? Yeah.
Yes.
The next, and I think one of the ones that are important is that the drug violations and disorderly conduct.
What do you think about money?
These are two that I think to me are very interesting and need to be examined a little bit more about why they're only Black people being charged with these. Charge group 3, escape from custody, fighting, afraid,
Cash out my shit.
larceny from buildings. Again, all these only Black people are charged. And then again, most of these again on this one, larceny from buildings, larceny from motor vehicle theft of all, motor vehicle theft. And some of these are, I think the way the language has changed. And so that you're gonna see multiple would have been one thing, but now it's several things. And murder, non-negligent homicide, I think is what that one is. And yes. There's only one of those, which I was pleased to see. Group 5, again, so there's some that are possession of concealed weapon, I think, and possession of stolen property, purse snatching, same thing. So again, most of these, you're gonna see the larger number with Black people, and some of them are only, and ROD is resist, obstruct, and delay. Thank you. So again, those are only, and so you have 2 resist and obstructs here, ROD and resist and obstruction. And those again are only Black people are being charged with that.
It's got something to do with the change in reporting over time to be compliant with FBI data, that the rules actually change, so they'll double up sometimes.
Yeah. So, but the point is that they're only Black people are being charged with that. But here is a really good one, I think, to examine is the shoplifting. Shoplifting is a really good example of what it looks like when you're probably having more calls, 911 calls, or responding to a business. So most of these are Walmart or Dollar General. And these are almost for the money on the number for your area for statistically, this would probably almost be perfect. And what that tells me is that the public, the community, are calling fairly or equally. And what they're responding to is what they're seeing, and what they're seeing is multiple different types of people, which I was very surprised. I was expecting to see a different number there, but that actually was encouraging to me. And the other thing it proved to me was that white people break the law in Kinston.
This is true.
They're there and they're doing it. So that means that you can find them in some places, but not in others. And I think that's important for people to know that.
I think you can find them everywhere.
Yeah, you're right. But I think sometimes some of the language I've heard is that white people aren't in Kinston and they're not breaking the law. Well, clearly
They are.
They are.
They are, but not being reported, and they're
Yeah.
not being charged.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I
So-
think that's what I was gonna add as well. You know, if all of these statistics are like, you know, the 911 calls or the suspicious activity, just everything, I think that has a lot to do with it as well. Certain groups may call 911 more than, you know, other groups. And then, like you guys said, I mean, all races are in Kinston, but it also has a lot to do with the main areas. I'm not saying other areas are not policed. That's not what I'm saying. It's just some areas are going to be policed a little bit more because of, you know, the higher rates of crimes or whatever it may be. And
So we're definitely gonna get into that part about where we're seeing the policing happening, and I think that fits in exactly with what you're talking about, Cassandra. Anybody else? Any thoughts? So another one that I thought was interesting was simple physical assault. Taking a look and go. So yes, it's not just Black kids that are like getting into fights or things like that. There are other people that are doing these too, but it's really predominantly only showing up for Black people.
We respond to all of those. That's what's reported to us.
Okay, I'm just telling you. I mean, just saying. You know, I think it's important.
I just we had comments about not being arrested, not being charged. Every one of these are something we responded to.
Again, part of my challenge is that I can't tell that in the data right now. And so if you want, I think, and I shared this with Keith before, that part of it is let's annotate that, let's start separating that data so that we can be clear and go, look, we did respond to this phone call and that this is what happened. And then because right now, all I can do is say it's on view. So again, this is why shoplifting was so exciting to me, why I tease it out even more, and so that people can look at that and go, okay, so this is so yes, it's disproportionate in that we have more Black people represented, but it's still numerically closer to what we should be looking for. And this could give us a goal or an example of what we should be working towards. Okay? And burglary, forcible entry, again, we're seeing something numerically that we're going, this is probably, and I'm saying this in general, this is probably mainly calls. And so that we'll be able to go, this is a different way of engaging. This is KPD responding to phone calls versus KPD maybe figuring out or identifying crime on their own. Yeah, officer initiated. Yeah, okay. So here we go. And so how about this? Let me check in. Is this too much? Do we need to take a break before we move on? Let me survey the group. Everybody's their faces are looking long. Everybody's okay. Should we keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going. Nod some heads. Keep going. Okay. All right. So I'm going to check in before we get totally through with this again so that we can slow down and then give everybody a chance to go, okay, Lenny, I've had enough. I can't take anymore. Okay? Okay. So now we're moving on to disparate treatment. And so once again, the overrepresentation is just sheer numbers of interactions. It's not about the type of interaction. It's not about who said what to whoever. None of that is included in that. It's just how many times people are showing up being interacted with. Now, disparate treatment is different in that we're going to see how they are, once they engage, how they are treated differently or the same. Okay. So here's an example, and I showed this one a little bit earlier to you, which was about drug violations. So drug violations, from the reporting I saw, I didn't see any big amount of drugs. I would say like large amounts of marijuana. All of them were marijuana. There wasn't anything that was any serious, huge, amounts or quantities of drugs. So what we're looking at is very small, minuscule amounts. Some of them were found in schools. Some of them were found on the street. And so the question is, when we look at this, what does this say about how we look at drugs in our community, and how, what kind of punishment or treatment are we looking at for small amounts of marijuana? Because again, we're not seeing large amounts. So we can't make statements like, oh, we have a big drug problem or a drug war going on, because your data simply doesn't say that. So any thoughts about this?
I have a question.
Yes.
I got a question too.
Okay, who wants to go first?
Do you don't have we gotten to the point yet where you've pulled these drug violations and disposition?
What do you mean?
How much of this is referred and how much of this is handled?
No, we're not there yet, but we will get there.
Okay, all right, good.
So
Anybody
my question is, so it's just saying people dealing with weed. Are some of these cases on a federal level that's not reported with the Kinston Police Department, where it goes out, is referred out?
No, Les, this is all going to be kids 15 and under, and none of these are going to be like that. All of these are going to be, from what Lene is telling me and what my perceptions would be, they're all just going to be a little, like a bag of weed, small amounts of marijuana kind
Very
of thing.
small.
So we have to document this, because if the officer's encountering this, he has to seize it. If you have to seize it, it has to be a very strict chain of custody to show that the evidence is properly stored. So I'm very interested to see how many of these were handled within the department and released, but there has to be documentation due to that controlled substance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right, thanks, Chief.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So with this slide right here, if there was a offense at South Lenoir or Deep Run, Pink Hill, that would be the sheriff's department, right? So it wouldn't show up on this chart?
It would not. You're correct.
Okay, because I think the numbers might be a little different if that was the case, because like Cassandra was just saying about, the geography of it, if Pink Hill or LaGrange was up here, I think the numbers would be different, but that's why I was checking to see if the sheriff's department would handle those calls.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel those numbers would be much different as well, but this is all KP data, KP data. And also, I started to mention earlier when Lene spoke of these are all people from our community. So that is inside the city addresses. So I think 10% were not in the city. Well, they may have.
So I think that's a little different. I think, and again, that's kind of how your officers report it. Mm-hmm. Most of them reported residents as in the county. Some of them were city, but some of them were the person.
No, what I'm saying, it showed 90% as being residents. That means they live inside the city limits.
All I can tell you is what your form says and what the officers reported was that they resided in some of them included those that were county residents as residents. So they checked the resident box.
Okay, we'll follow up on that, but that's it's easy.
But you're right.
For me to pull out.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, that's inaccurate.
Yeah.
Because residents is
in the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll follow up on that.
Yeah. It's several of those kind of things. I think, like we've said before, we need to clarify.
There's going to be little bumps, but residence means inside the city. But it could be if it's a Pink Hill, Deep Run, LaGrange, still a local kid. But they would be listed as a non-resident for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Linnea, I had a question, Colleen.
Okay.
You know, in the very beginning when we started with this, the sheriff's department was being a part. Now I don't see them on here today. Maybe they are, and I've just missed them coming on. But you know, is there a way that we can get them engaged as well? Because I think that these issues are not just a city problem; they're an entire county problem. I just, you know, I'm happy to do whatever I can do, but I just think it's so important for them to see this information as well. Or is that too big for what we're trying to do?
It's not. And to be honest with you, I think every agency needs to do this kind of deep dive into their data to see how the interactions go so that they can go, this is my piece in the overall system. And that's what KPD has done. They are looking at their piece of what the work is, if that's a way to say it. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So,
Linnea, that was a very polite way to say it.
well, I try to be polite on some.
And I appreciate it. Yeah, we would love to see and feel a lot of other data, but right now we're focusing on our KPD data because that's what we have control over.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But
and
we
I have
do
got
need to
to
encourage
apologize,
that.
but I do have to step away at this point. I've got some things that have to be filed, and I don't have enough bandwidth to be on this and doing that at the same time. So I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
This is Linda, and y'all might have done this before I got on, but is there anywhere that you give, like in comparison to the percentage of whites and blacks that this data might be applicable to? Am I making any sense?
No, you're right. You're right. And I'm sorry. We had this conversation for a second, and I said at the end I do that, but
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm in but who I forgot your name just that fast.
Oh, Miss Linda.
Yeah. No, not Miss Linda.
Leah.
Yes.
Okay.
The city planning lady shared with us. I forget your name. What's your name? Sarah. I can't see her name on this list anymore because I'm looking at myself. That she shared with us really quickly the race breakdown. You want to share it again, Sarah, please, real quick?
Yeah, it's 67%, but as Chief Dilday pointed out, that's not broken down by age group. So we might see a different percentage if we broke it down by, I think they would probably give it to us in under 18. So I tried to look around for that for a little bit, but I didn't see it, so I don't know.
I don't think the census actually collects the data that way, but maybe social services can kind of give us some understanding of the number of youth that are in the city and the county that they estimate. That might be a source.
And the other thing I'd like to see is back on the chart a few ones back, like where you listed what the charges were and that kind of thing.
Yes.
What percentage of whites was that that's located in the city, and what percentage of blacks was that was located in there?
All this data is just city data. So that's all it's going to be. It's not county at all.
No, I know that, but
Okay.
what I'm saying is, even in just in the city, like what percentage of black kids did this thing that was wrong, drugs or whatever it was, and what percentage of the white kids in the city did this thing that was wrong?
Okay. So maybe we can go, and I think maybe we can spend some time and break down a little bit more, just so I can explain it a little bit more. And I do want to not keep us on here that long. So, but I'm very happy to go back and explain what I need to explain again if you need. And I'm recording all of this so we can make it so people can come back and review it at the beginning like we did before.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for being late.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I just wanted to make sure. I don't think you heard me say that. Okay, so moving on. So again, these are another couple of categories again where we're seeing the representation of simple non-physical threat, intimidation, simple physical assault, and trespassing. So what we're seeing here again is percentage-wise, what we're seeing the interactions being with law enforcement. I just wanted to show you some different examples of what it looked like.
And just so, and I hate to take up so much time, but just sort of point out what I'm trying to get at, is it makes it look so bad to me so far as the black kids are concerned. But when you, and I may be wrong, but when you look at the percentage of the black kids that are in the city, I don't think you're gonna find it as high as it looks like it is here. Is what I guess I'm trying to say.
And you were correct. You were correct.
Does that make sense?
You were
I don't
correct.
want it to look like, you know, it's looking to me right now, because it might come back, you know, to just 10% or something. But to me, that says a lot less than, you know, than this line. I'm sorry, I should have.
No. And part of the reason why I said that we are going to have to go over this longer than an hour is because it takes a minute to digest all this kind of information and to be able to go, okay, I get what this is saying, and now how do I apply it later on into what we're trying to do? Okay. So yes, you're right. You're right.
I'm sorry, I have one really quick one.
Sure.
I see these graphs and they're horrible. I mean, it's saddening, but why is it just black and white? Why is it only black and white?
Chief, would you like to answer?
Yes, I'd like to answer that. So we don't we don't do like partial. If you look at census data, it'll be one race, multi-race. We use the state form, and it only you know, allows that. We have a very small, extremely small population within the city limits of anything other than black and white. While we have a substantial Hispanic population outside the city of Kinston, inside the city, and what the Kinston police officers generally respond to are people who live in town, and it's black and white. That's our breakdown.
And I don't know, Mr. Burns, did you want to share anything about that?
As relates to, I'm not, what's the question?
Oh, she was asking about why is it only showing black and white, the data. And I'm basing it, from what I understand, on the form itself.
Right, that's right. I mean, I think the copy of the juvenile contact sheet is attached to your data, so everyone can kind of look at the makeup of that sheet and determine what information can be included and what information cannot.
So yes, there were some that I found, probably maybe 2 that looked like they were probably Latino, or but they are listed as white on the forms.
So I do not know if it's still this way, but for a long time, and Keith may be able to help me out with this, the proper way in North Carolina to list that would be white with an ethnicity of Hispanic, but the race would
that is correct.
And that would be on the police report form, not on the juvenile contact form, correct?
No, it's not, but that's how it's reported to the state, would be white with an ethnicity of Hispanic.
Okay, because I didn't see any ethnicity mark.
No, it's not on here.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking, yeah. Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
I see skin tone, but I don't see race.
Yeah, that's the question I had.
If you look at the third, where it says name, last, middle, first, date of birth, age, race, sex, place of birth, citizenship.
But you're correct, skin tone is there. I asked, and that's one of my follow-up questions about the form and what we can do to address or do some kind of gap to address that data collection piece, because skin tone is problematic and confusing.
I do see race now. I do see it now.
Yeah.
So looking at the student population, so like City of Kinston High School, it's probably, Mr. Williams would probably have to chime in on it, but I would think it's 98% Black students, even from the grade of 9th through the 12th, just in the city of Kinston. I guess that would probably play a role of why you have so many Blacks on the data, right?
Or I'll let, so Mr. Williams probably, the majority of the contacts are happening outside of school. There are a good amount that are happening in schools, but the majority are happening outside of school. So the schools are not responsible for the bulk of the contacts. That's the way to say it.
Yeah, I was just saying, as far as the population of the city of Kinston, you would, you know, if you got that many Black students in school, that would be in the city of Kinston, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Mr. Lipford. I think that's accurate.
For Kinston High School.
And yeah, that's for all the, you know, that's in city, because you're not gonna have, when you go to North Lenoir, you're not gonna have that population anyway.
Right.
So you might as well take the student population that's in Kinston, Rochelle Middle, and you know the other schools, Kinston High School, that's making up close to 90, you know, 90+%. That's probably why you got a big percentage that KPD deal with.
I have a question, Ms. Lene or Mr. Williams, if either of you can answer. Or has this data been shared about, I know you said that the bulk of the contacts come from outside the school system. Is there a number of the contacts or anywhere that distinction is made of how many do come from the school system?
Yes, I'm gonna go over that in a little while.
Okay.
But thank you, it's good to see you.
Good to see you and everyone else is joining late.
You're fine. Come in, come out, do what you gotta do. Okay, so next, one of the data points that we wanted to show was how many are unique contacts or repeat contacts. And so in general, the majority of the contacts are unique. And I thought it was important to point out that all of the white contacts are unique. So there are no repeat white contacts. So that would mean that we're not having, you even have the conversation about people talking about repeat offenders or things like that. You're not having a large repeat offender issue. But the small amount of repeats that you are having are with Black youth. Small. And I think that that's very good. That's a good thing to see, that it's not a lot of repeated contact for over these 4 or 5 years. So again, here's the first charge again. Just, I wanted to give you some perspective one more time. I've showed you the slide before. So this is the total counts by race. And what I mean by this is how many counts kids are getting. So the majority of your youth are getting 1 charge. And then obviously the next is 2 and 3. But the important thing is to see that that in general, you're not seeing white kids getting charged with a lot of charges, right? So they're getting 1 charge in general. And it's only 1 white kid that's getting 2 charges and 1 white kid that's getting 3 charges, right? But you're seeing multiple with Black people. So what does that tell us? That that Black people are being charged with more things.
They're not charges, Linnea, just documentation on a form doesn't refer to any court activity.
Okay, counts. That's what is labeled in the box.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
And this is Jerry again. At whatever time you guys get ready for us to dig a little bit deeper into it, if we are given the information, then we can actually go and help determine which cases, which of these contact reports resulted in actual referrals to juvenile court, or not necessarily the juvenile court, just the juvenile intake. We'll be glad.
So are you saying that the ones that actually made it to your office to be
Yeah, to actually, by North Carolina statute, to actually be charged, because a charge doesn't occur until our office receives it as a juvenile complaint.
Okay.
So that's the official charge as it relates to a juvenile in the state of North Carolina. When Juvenile Justice Office reviews that document for legal sufficiency to make sure it meets all the elements of the crime. And then at that point, we receive it, mark it received, and the juvenile then has been officially charged, which may be different from the actual numbers that they'll report. I'm assuming that I'm trying to get some numbers to run, but for 4 years, it's a lot of data. So
yes, it is.
My system keep breaking up because I was going to try to give a snapshot, but it's just not working.
Yeah, Jerry, they are going to be drastically different because, we're using the state form, and even if it's handled within the department and released, that's where you put, the incident description would be under charge. Doesn't mean that there was any court action and it was referred to juvenile court authorities. Let's say it was shoplifting or an assault. It would go there, but it may be handled in the part. It may be something that you never even see, doesn't even make it out of the Kinston Police Department.
But you do understand what I'm saying about the number. Okay. That what we're seeing is that the number of counts or the number of things that appear on the form that that Black children that end up with more on their forms than white children. Okay. Okay. So again, this is interaction by race and by the first count. So what we're looking at and when I say the first count is if a person got multiple counts, we're only going by the very first one, which typically is the most serious, correct? Typically, I think some of them weren't on the form that way, but in general, that's the first count. So
that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. So again, 107 of them were referred to juvenile authorities. So that should be the 107 should be the one that the data that Jerry should be able to tease out to see which were actually referred on versus those that weren't. The handled within the department would mean no, they probably weren't referred on to juvenile authorities, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and again, that's why I'm saying that our goal here would be to flip these numbers and decrease them and start seeing other referrals for in other groups. Okay. How are we doing? Let me survey the room, survey the chat room. How are we doing? We have some other business to do, so I'm okay with pausing if you need to. Nod your head, keep going. Keep going, yes, nod head. Okay, just wanted to check. Just wanted to check. Okay. So the referral primary, so here again is referred to juvenile authorities and handled within the department, social services, teen court, none, and other police departments. So here it is according to Black and the different, the different referral sources and according to race. So what we're seeing here again, and this is just a big snapshot view of all of the different charges. Again, all of them on one slide. But what we're seeing here is that in general, they're really only, ooh, who's that? I think that was you. Was that no? That wasn't no. Okay. So what we're really seeing here is, and the other sheets are really telling you, is that there really only one or two options when you deal with law enforcement. That you either get handled within the department where basically they counsel you or talk to your parent, right? And then they release you. or you're going to juvenile authorities. So part of the reason why I'm bringing this up is that it's important to know that they have other, law enforcement has other options and the community has other options. And that what we want law enforcement to start doing, that depending on what the charge is, depending on what it is that you feel, or the count is, depending on what it is it that we, and I say we as collectively, what is it that we want them to do? If you see someone, and there's some things that statutorily they have to do, but yes, am I just saying that right? But then there's some other things that are discretionary, and that we can go, look, these are resistant obstructing or trespassing. Some of those are probably more what we as a community can go, we think this actually speaks to our values a little bit better. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's part of the reason why I listed this out. So maybe we want to say that if it's in a school-like setting, we always want to refer this to teen court, or we always want to refer this to something else. And that way, no matter what, we're not going to see this huge number of kids that end up for fighting ending up in the justice system. Yeah? Thoughts? And I can break this down so you can see all of the charges, but it's just the big picture. So now we're going to talk about officers. And the reason, hey, that's what we're here for. So this is not necessarily, this chart is not about this officer was this person, or they charge this all the time, or they do this all the time. This chart is simply about officers interacting with kids, how many times they have interacted. It's important to know that some officers are having a lot more interactions than others. And why are they having those interactions? Well, obviously some of them are SROs. They're going to have more interactions. Some of them, depending on what their beat is, probably they're going to have more interaction with young people. But some, maybe not so much. I didn't see a whole much for Dill Day, but depending on, I saw 2, I think, for Keith.
Look back 20 years, it'll look differently.
I'm sure. But the point is that part of it is that maybe we need to set a measure or a goal as to at what point officers receive more additional training with dealing with youth, right? That these officers are interacting with kids 5-20 times in a year. That means they need maybe more youth de-escalation training. That means maybe they need more how to engage with youth in a different way. Or maybe they need to know how to access programs differently.
Okay.
You know? Okay. Thoughts?
Yes. So just looking at there's 16.
This isn't all of them, obviously.
Obviously not, but these are the ones that are most recurring, correct?
No. This is all of them. It just doesn't all show up on the chart.
Okay.
But Brock is your biggest winner.
Correct. And the reason Brock is our biggest winner is for a long period of time, he was assigned to an investigative position where he investigated a lot of crimes involving juveniles, sex crimes involving juveniles and things like that. So obviously his name would appear more because the things that he's investigating are non-divertible offenses. So out of the 16 that are listed here, 10 of them no longer work here. And of the 6 that do, all of them either are currently or have been investigators who investigate felonies involving children, which would cause their numbers to occur more frequently.
Yolanda, I'm gonna have to leave. I got another appointment.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question to Chief Dill Day?
Sure.
Yes, Ms. Lily.
Look, when we're doing the de-escalation training, is there anything in that training centered around culture? You know, because your department is pretty new. They're very, new people. And I know when you talk about de-escalation, I would assume, just how you go about it. But with our population and our boys and girls, is there anything culturally? Because, you know, a lot of times our first interaction with the police is going to determine, you know, some behavior kinds of things that get us in deeper.
Yes, ma'am. So part of the CIT training, it does involve a cultural response and not necessarily the officer's thought process or experiences, but bringing to the forefront the experiences of individuals that we deal with, and that we're not all the same, as far as we don't all have the same experiences and come from the same place. So that is the main portion of the early onset of that training. Our goal is to ensure that all of our new officers coming in have that training. KPD is plagued by turnover, as a lot of agencies are. 25% of our patrol officers, our officers in uniforms driving marked cars who are going to be the ones who show up at your house, 25% of them have less than a year of service. 50% of them have less than 2 years of service, and 75% of them have less than 5 years of service. City's taking great steps to change that through career development programs. We've worked very short for a long time. Our numbers are almost to the point of being full right now. And you know, only thing I can pledge to is we're trying to do a better job. But the short answer to your question, Ms. Lilly, is yes. That training does involve cultural aspects.
Okay.
And I mean, this might be an opportunity for you to support and maybe make it more robust to address some of these things, because I think it's important to say, look, what we're seeing here is a pattern of interaction, right? And what we're seeing here is maybe some misunderstandings or I don't know, whatever it is. But the point being is that what can we do to address some of these over representation of contacts, right? So I think it's a good point, and I think we should say, hey, this is something we can do to make it better.
I want to ask a question, or
yes,
I have a thing based on that. I appreciate that Lily had brought up the culture aspect of it, but I also wonder when it comes to the training of these new officers, because I know there's so many new officers, is there training, and if so, how in depth or how much when it comes to not only mental health, but the special needs community? Because most of the time when you're going to be running into individuals, you're not going to know that they have special needs to start off with. And sometimes you can figure it out during your conversation or with what you're dealing with, but then sometimes you may not know until after the fact. So that one's a really iffy one to deal with a lot of times, but most emergency or first responders doesn't seem to have a lot of training in that or know how to handle or respond to certain individuals with certain diagnoses.
So, Ms. Houston, we are accepting your officer to come provide some training to our young officers. Be careful what you ask for, because you might get it.
No, you're right. And we one of the things that I've shared with Chief Dilday and the former chief was that there's some additional trainings that I'd like them to start implementing, which would be like trauma informed policing and some other things like that address exactly what you're talking about. So yes, I think that's definitely on the list of things that need to be added to.
Well, I'm going to tell you now, Chief, it's important to me. I'll be happy to come help.
Good.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
And Chief Dilday, you had spoken with us about how many of your police officers are white policemen, you know, now too. So I mean,
I couldn't hear you, Ms. Lilly. What did you say?
I say you had spoken with us about how many of your policemen are young, new, and white.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I've shared with you last week on the executive committee. I believe you were in that call as far as our hiring practices, and that's got a lot to cover today. But we're doing everything we can to make our portion to make our department mirror our community as much as possible. If you look at our hiring practices and the folks that we've hired uncertified and sent to school, that doesn't mean that they'll all end up 6 months later with a uniform on. But I can show you that we have diligent efforts to hire folks from within our community. Our biggest goal is, as far as recruiting, is at our high school. I need somebody from here who has ties to this community, who cares about this community. I can hire a guy who just got out of the military in Jacksonville, and he may be here 20 years later, but the odds are he won't be. He or she won't be. But the person who's from here has ties here and already has roots in this community and cares about this community, the officers that we need serving this community.
And I appreciate this conversation about diversity. It's a good conversation to have. But
back on track.
Statistically, Black officers and white officers
doesn't matter.
Yes, this behavior that we're seeing is Black and white officers. There is no difference in what I'm seeing.
Yeah, if you look at force data and things like that, there's no difference.
Yeah,
but
so it's really about.
It still makes a difference to our community.
No, it does, and I'm saying, and all I'm saying is that diversity is a conversation. But this is an additional conversation along with diversity about making sure that people understand that training is the way to address this problem, and selection is the way to address this problem in identifying officers or people or strategies that can address and reduce these problems. Because there's really I think it is the nature of contact that the more contact you make, the more contact you will have. Okay.
Linnea,
yes.
It almost makes me question if this is also a larger community issue as opposed to a law enforcement issue, because if the perception is, oh, these Black kids are outside in my neighborhood, they must be doing something bad, then of course law enforcement is going to be called, whether they are in fact doing something bad or not. It's more so the perception of the community that's increasing that and bringing it to the forefront.
That's definitely a factor.
I'm kind of concerned about now.
It's definitely a factor, which is again why I say it's important for us to know interactions, like officer initiated interaction versus 911, and what the officers can manage, what they can control are their interactions. They're going to respond to 911 calls, now can we track 911 calls and that they might have some kind of racial undertone to them? I think at some point that can start being collected, but I think that specifically officer initiated is what, like, about to call you Major Dilday. Chief Dilday has absolute and complete authority over, right?
And that's true. And do keep this in mind, we still have control over the 911 call. We're still gonna go.
Yes.
But because you call 911 doesn't mean the police are on my side. We're still go with an open slate to determine what issues are, and we would turn an issue is there's a Black kid walking through my neighborhood and I don't know him. It doesn't mean that's going to be a negative encounter. It may turn into a fruitful conversation. So we do have to go, but we're not on somebody's side when we get there.
So I'm going to move on. So here is interactions, and I think this is a very good slide, and I hope you all are really able to eat this one, dive in. This is officer interaction by officer type and referral. So what this is that the blue are SROs. So SROs, if you look at the first column referred to juvenile authorities, SROs are more likely to refer youth to juvenile authorities than to handled within the department. Now, what does that mean? That means that SROs who are having the most contact with youth, they're doing it every day, all day, are more likely to refer them to juvenile authorities. Thoughts? I know, it's a big one.
I have a lot of thoughts, but a lot of it is perception. So, I can't back it up with facts. So I kind of prefer to. I mean, they're there every day. So by the time they do a contact, they may have had contact with this kid 5, 10, 15 times that it gets to the point of, all right, I got to do something. So then we document. Well, then it turns into, okay, I have one contact with this kid and I had to send him to court. The goal of our school resource officers are there to provide safety and be a resource to the kids and not handle discipline problems. And, early on in our school resource issues, and I believe Mr. Williams can comment on this, we had a little bit of a different role, and we've got that straightened out. Where, our officers are there to be a true resource to the kid. And only if it gets to the point where it's beyond a school problem do they get involved. And
I would suggest that, yes, in theory, that would be what it is. But
I don't have hard data to prove that.
Yeah. And part of the challenge for me in being able to tease out school versus street is that the way you all report the data, you don't report them as this is a school related incident, right? So what we need, that's another data thing we need to start teasing out so that we can go, this, even if it happened around the school, it still is considered connected to the school, and then we can address those separately. But I did tease out by address, but some of the addresses aren't all that clear.
I think map plotting would be the only way to do that. To look at how much of it centers around the school.
Yeah, and you did do that early on. So the next one right next to it is handled within the department. And again, so the SROs are it looks like they're not choosing to handle things within the department. And that means that my question was, and I shared this with Keith, was so what is the supervisor's role in making the call about what's being referred to juvenile authorities and not? And what is the protocol? What is the decisions that are being made internally that advance things? Because again, what I'm saying is I'm seeing in the schools, and what will show you literally what happened in the schools is that we're not seeing like serious, we're not seeing serious fights where we're seeing major injuries. We're not seeing major drug usage or drugs in the school. So I think it's important for us to go ahead and go, hey, this is, for these type of offenses, this is what we really want to see happen, which is these should be handled within the department. Even if you've done it 7 times, it's still handled within the department, because we didn't even see any theft, in school. So I was like, wow, you all should really be proud. These are some really little angels in general. I mean, I got into several school fights myself. So, I mean, it's not such a strange behavior to have a fight. It's if it goes beyond and it gets very violent, or if you see a weapon involved, right? But other than that, then that is just simply a disciplinary issue. And we should be seeing more of those being handled within the department than referred to juvenile authorities.
We'll pull each one of them and look at them and see if we can figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody thoughts? Anything about that? Miss Lily?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Come on, somebody. Are you just pondering?
I'll chime in. One of the things, and maybe it's for our next or maybe a subsequent meeting, but I'd really like to, with some of our team members who are on the call, to share some information about our PACS agreement. And I know we've talked about that before, but I really think that cuts to the essence of, or at least touches on the essence of what we're talking about here. And then to also bring in some data, some pre and post data about out of school suspensions and exclusionary discipline practices that we've been working on, and the tremendous decline that we've seen in our district over the last 4 years. Because a lot of and first when we were looking at it, a lot of it was anecdotally related to related to contacts with law enforcement and beyond that, actual charges. But when we started trying to go in and break it out, what we saw is that more often than not, the out-of-school suspensions, if we put parameters in 5 days or more of out-of-school suspension, those were related in more than 60% of the cases to some type of contact with law enforcement. And that was prior to our PACS agreement. And Judge James is on the call, and also Judge Heath, and she led those efforts in Lenoir County and Wayne County and Greene County too, I believe. And we've been very proud of those efforts and what we've been doing, and we'd like to share that. But really, the concept I think is important to focus on is really analyzing the data, what is, and the reasons behind it, and the mindsets that drive actions, and saying, why are we doing this? And then looking at the actual charges, the things for which we were kids are being referred and then in turn being charged, and creating that agreement. These things will constitute charges or could constitute charges. These things for a first offense we would not look at. Well, we're not law enforcement, but all parties at the table agreed to that, and then we have followed through on it. And I really think that that's been a successful collaboration. So at some point, I would like to request some time in a subsequent meeting that our team members and I could talk about that, maybe present some data to show what was the case before and what wasn't now, because it doesn't just touch on charges. It's also reclaiming some of those instructional hours that our exclusionary practices over time were excluding kids, and the disproportionality was off the scale.
Right.
So there's so many things in there. I just threw out a lot, but I would like to share something about that at a future meeting.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And I think also one of the additional things that I'd like to see is potentially what are some of the moments where we're seeing double punishment, where we're seeing, people being suspended and being sent to the juvenile authorities, and what some of those consequences are. What are some of the longer term consequences of having to be in both systems at the same time?
That was part of the core, one of the theme discussions in developing the PACS agreement. Okay. So those discussions relate very well to what you just said and what we're talking about. So we'd be happy to share at least that piece of it that relates to this overall discussion.
Great.
Remember, we are under a statutory duty to report certain types of juvenile arrest to principals. So just keep that in mind. So, even though there are separate systems, the general statutes require us in certain situations to notify a principal when a juvenile has been arrested or contacted the crime if it were an adult.
Ms. Lilly, did you have anything to share, or we can move on?
No, Mr. Williams certainly got all that information, and I think Lenoir County would be pleased to hear that information from the PAC and those numbers of how the system is handling kids and how it's and all of that. It will be wonderful information for all of us.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, both of you, all three of you. But I thought this was a really good illustration of the officers and their discretion and how their use of discretion plays out. Okay, moving on. So I do want to say this. We are at 3:39. Is that correct? I'd really like to stop. If you all are okay with that, and I'd like for us to pick another day that we can continue this conversation. And also, I will add some additional information based on some of the questions you all have asked, which are all amazing and wonderful questions. Do you all want to try to do this again in 2 weeks? We haven't met in a very long time, which is why we're trying to pack too many things in at one time. Can we plan to schedule a meeting in 2 weeks from now? I'm thinking about the holiday that's coming up and how we are going to move forward as the committee in the time of COVID.
How about 2 weeks at the same Wednesday at the same time, 2 weeks from now?
That would be the 8th after the holiday. Would that work for people?
Yes.
Any major objections to that? Anyone? No, I don't see any major faces going absolutely not, Linnea. Okay, so we will plan on the 8th, the 7th, 8th, 2020. Are still meeting via Zoom?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. And so this will, if you all have any questions, if there's any data that you'd like to pull or that you would like to see specifically, please send me an email. I'd really appreciate it so that I can have some sense of what it is you all are looking for. Take a minute and review some of the additional slides that that I haven't gone over yet, but I will. And thank you all for being willing to do this deep data dive. This is hard work and it's not as much fun, but it's important.
Thank you, Linnea. Linnea, can you stay on for just?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else have any thoughts or anything else before we adjourn?
I don't have any, Linnea. Gosh, I'm sorry. But if anybody came on after we did an introduction, please send me an email or text me or whatever so I can make sure I have you on attendance accountability. Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you. This is an awful lot of data to put together and disseminate. So I know it took a lot of time and effort, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being willing to listen.
And Linnea,
yes.
and Chief, whenever we get to that point where you guys want to take a look at what actually came to us, then I'll be glad to try to put that together for you.
Thank you, Jerry. You pulled some stuff together for me maybe 6-8 months ago, and
yes.
we may get to there. So a lot of it we probably already have, but I will keep in touch.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, sir.
But we definitely will. I do want to compare some things.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Anybody else have any other thoughts, questions?
Linnea?
Yes.
It's Tiffany. I just wanted to make sure I was still a part of the email group because I didn't get a notification regarding the meeting, so I jumped on late because somebody forwarded it to me.
Thank you. Can you send, do you have my email address in that email?
I think so, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Can you just shoot me an email real quick and me and Yolanda, and then we'll make sure you get added to that list.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming. Those of you, this is your first meeting. I know it was a lot. We normally have more fun than this in meetings, so we'll get back to fun at some point. Anyway, thank you very much, and you are relieved. You can leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Been a lot.
Yes, it was. It was a lot. It was a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all for everything you're doing for our kids here in Lenoir County. Yes. Did somebody call me?
Yeah, no, I did, Miss Lily. I said thank you. I appreciate you. You're always there for us. Thank you.
Well, look, thank y'all for all you're doing for us. We appreciate it. We really do.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you need
Okay,
help?